I'm the bad guy. I'm the
It was another hectic week in the NFL as the playoff picture is beginning to take shape. I'm Matt Charles. Welcome to Across the Gridiron, and I'm here once again with my friend and yours, Eddie Ekwo, to break all of this down for you. So, Eddie, my friend, how are you feeling? How was your weekend?
It was great. It was great. It's a good weekend. Good Monday night as well, as you can imagine. You know what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. You know, as they say. No, it was good. It was good. How about you? How was your?
Well, in Sheffield, it absolutely threw it down all weekend. Biblical, reign of biblical proportions. So I spent the time doing what every good dad should be doing: is I stuck myself in a room and I built IKEA furniture all weekend. So that was my weekend. Not as exciting as yours, I'm sure. But this must be a monumental weekend this season, because this must be the first weekend that both the Dolphins and the Cowboys won this season.
I know. Look at that.
The first one.
We need to go play the lottery because this doesn't happen often.
It doesn't happen at all this season.
It doesn't happen at all. It's not one or the other doing stuff. But no, it's good to have smiles on the faces, of a lot of fans. And honestly, I think there were a lot of fans this weekend that had unexpected smiles, on their face, because it was like some unpredictable results. I mean, there were results that happened that you were like, oh my goodness, what's going on? But really, some very good games. There were a lot of the games that I was like, oh, this is really, really interesting to watch, because, it wasn't like there was nothing happening. And of course, there's a couple of incidents that also happened, over the weekend, Jamar Chase, and all of that, Cowboys receivers. But no, it was certainly an entertaining weekend for football.
Oh, no, absolutely. And it's one of these where I think it's almost too much to break down in a single half an hour podcast, which we need to try and keep it down to half an hour today. So what we may do is we might, when we do our predictions later on in the week, we might actually pick up some of these other big stories that's going on in football. Like, we probably won't get time to talk about the drama with Chase. Probably won't get a chance to talk about why two of Cowboys' biggest players didn't play on Monday Night Football. We probably won't get time to talk about any of that today, because what we want to try and do, I know normally when we do these recordings, we pick 3 or 4 key games that we've sort of taken our eye, but we're going to look at it today. We're going to look at a lot of these key games, because there are a lot of really big, important games that happened over the course of the weekend. We want to try and frame it around sort of the playoff picture at the moment, because a lot of playoff altering games happened over the course of the weekend. So let's start in the NFC, which I think is becoming, again, just a fascinating division in terms of how tight it is. Now, the game we're going to start on is in the NFC West, where we talked last week when we talked about this game between the LA Rams and the Seattle Seahawks. 2 of the best teams in the NFC, potentially 2 of the best teams in the total NFL at the moment. The way they've been playing, the consistency they've been playing, and they threw it down on Sunday in one of the early games. And we said the winner of this game could be the NFC winner and could be a Super Bowl team. Now, as it happens, the Rams won. I'm not going to use this form to say who predicted the Rams to win. We'll save that for the prediction video later, because it was a glorious weekend for me. But yeah, so the Rams came out 21-19 victors. They are second current seeds in the NFC. Seahawks are still well in it. They're 5th seed, probably the best of the rest at the moment in terms of the wild card position. But Eddie, this was a really important game. How did you think this sort of unfolded, and what do you think it tells us about the playoffs?
It was a very fascinating game. I think the one thing that it gave me PTSD was around Sam Darnold. And if you remember last season, you had Sam Darnold having that magical, ride with the Minnesota Vikings. And, it seemed like he was playing well until the crunch game. And then he decided to have his worst game, ever in the season. And, this game, just made me think about that a little bit, and I'm like, can you really trust Sam Darnold when the pressure is really coming on? Because, this was against, a team that if they won this game, potentially controlling the destiny of the NFC West, and that's pressure. And a lot of quarterbacks, most quarterbacks can handle the pressure. Maybe some cannot. And you start to wonder, whether Sam Darnold is one of those that when the pressure is really on, he cannot handle it. When it comes to the Rams were great. The Rams played well. And maybe that shouldn't have been in doubt, considering a Super Bowl winning coach, Stafford playing like the MVP right now. The Rams don't beat themselves. They don't tend to make silly mistakes, all the sort of costly errors. Their functional defense is, effective. They make plays when they need to make plays, and the offense does what it needs to do. And Stafford is not giving the ball away. Most important thing, he's not giving the ball away. And when you don't give the ball away, your chances of winning is increasing, minute by minute in the NFL. And so you kind of look at that and you just say, yeah, the Rams, I know that the Eagles beat them, earlier on in the season, but I don't think that's the same Rams. I think this is a different looking Rams, towards the stretch as we head into the playoffs. And I think teams are going to be wondering to themselves, do we really want to face the Rams, right now? I don't think anyone will want to be facing them. So I think what they've done is they've laid out a marker, and now everybody else needs to sort of see how they can challenge, because, yeah, it's looking very clearly at least two teams are going to get out of the division, but the Rams look like they're probably going to go far.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a high chance that three teams for the NFC West can go in, because obviously you got the 49ers who won again this weekend. Yeah. They're only one game behind the Seahawks. So Seahawks are 7-3, 49ers are 7-4. Yeah. So it's going to be incredibly close with that. And I think the best use to describe the Rams performance was functional. Again, you're absolutely right about Stafford. And I mean, the reason why I picked the Rams over the Seahawks was just where your faith is, where is your trust? And I trust Stafford more than I trust Darnold. And Darnold has been immense. He's done so well to bring his career back. I'm really pleased to do it. And he's had a fantastic season, and he will continue to do that. And he will lead the Seahawks into the playoffs, whether they're 5th or 6th seed or something like that, But Stafford has just been, I mean, it wasn't spectacular this weekend, but he was functional, right? Mm. Completion rate just over 50%, right? Nothing particularly great. 130 yards again for him, fairly low numbers, 2 touchdowns, but no interceptions. They're not really turning the ball over. And this was, again, it was just functional. They raced to a 14-3 up at the end of first quarter, and Seahawks were just trying to play catch up for the rest of the game, and they just couldn't get it done, despite the fact they had more yards, passing yards, rushing yards. The fact they had more yards per play, they just, problem is 4 interceptions, right? And we've talked about this before. You lose the turnover battle. You lose the turnover battle, you're most likely to lose a game, and that's what happened this week. Yeah. Anything else you want to touch on that before we move on?
No. I think like you said there, I think the Rams are going to be a scary team. Same record, with the Eagles. I know the Eagles will have an edge over them, in terms of the number 1 seed, because they beat them, so they win that head to head. And Eagles has done a lot better in the conference, but I think that no one is going to want to face the Rams at all, including the Eagles.
No, absolutely not. I mean, let's just go looking at the playoff picture. I said Rams are 2nd, second seeds as it stands at the moment, but they're pretty much guaranteed a playoff place. You know, the odds are 99% plus. Whereas the Seahawks 92% probability, and then the 49ers 86% probability. So you're going to potentially have, or most likely have, 3 teams in that division. But the number 1 seed you mentioned, let's just touch on them briefly. And I say briefly because I know how much you love talking about the Philadelphia Eagles. They're currently 8-2. They won again. They beat Detroit Lions in I jokingly said before we jumped on the call that they are almost the antithesis of the Dallas Cowboys, because where you've got Dallas Cowboys are fantastic a fantastic offense, but no defense. The Eagles seemed opposite. Again, defensively immense against the Lions. They absolutely smothered Detroit, but the offense just isn't clicking. But they got it done. They're 8-2. They are moving into the Super Bowl winners, Super Bowl champions, and moving into the playoffs again, most likely. And obviously, this must make you just really happy to see the Eagles doing so well and be so efficient.
Disgusting, absolutely disgusting. Makes me sick to my stomach. This team, I don't understand how they keep on winning. I honestly don't. This is kind of one of those things that needs to be studied in like Oxford or Harvard, in one of those, like when they do those case studies and like they pick up some phenomenon and they decide to study them. Someone needs to go and study this Eagles team, because it makes no sense as to how they keep winning. They look bad on TV. They look bad like when you're watching them. The offense look like it's going nowhere very fast. But that defense is just, I mean, they've kept 2 teams back-to-back under 10 points. Under 10 points. And you wouldn't have thought the Lions would be one of those teams that they would have done that to. Right, the Lions that dropped the 50 burger on the Bears, early on in the season, and we're just scoring for fun and all of that. Everyone just looked, ordinary in that Lions team. But I mean, there was an incident in the play, and I know people talked about it. There was a pass interference, they called against the Lions that, maybe could have given the Lions an opportunity to, tie the game, or perhaps maybe go ahead, as they like to always go for 2 every time they get, the score a touchdown. But irrespective of that, you've got to say that this Eagles team are heading to the Super Bowl.
You think?
I cannot, when I was looking at something the other day, and it was talking about the Chiefs last season. But the Chiefs were in a lot of 1-score games, right? But those 1-score games swung in their favor. And in the last 13 games that they've been in 1-score games, they've won 12 of them, right? So, and the Eagles are kind of like in that mode where everything is swinging in their favor. They play the Dallas Cowboys. If CD caught that pass, maybe it would be a different thing. They play the Rams, and they edge it, over the Rams. It just seems like, the bounce is swinging in their favor. And when that's happening repeatedly, at some point you're thinking maybe it's not luck. Maybe it's about playing mistake-free football, right? And the quarterback doesn't do anything spectacular, but what he also doesn't do is give the ball away. And we're just talking about the Rams, and the fact that, you don't get the ball away, you win the games. And if you trust your defense, to do what they're supposed to do, you're probably going to win more games than you lose. So the Eagles, it seems like right now they're probably the favorites to go to that Super Bowl in the NFC East, despite, how I feel about them, which is annoying. I hope the Cowboys have something to say about that, even if we don't go anywhere.
I mean, I think the NFC is, the division is wrapped up. I mean, the Eagles are the only team with a winning record in that division. Cowboys are second at 4-5-1, and that, even if you got that win, you're not catching the Eagles. Yeah. But I think Eagles just could be the team that proves the point that defense wins championships. right? You can have a strong offense. They can, they can play lights out in a couple games, but you need that strong defense to take you all the way to the Super Bowl. And yeah, if the Eagles 1-0 to the Arsenal, if they do that all the way to the Super Bowl, then they're not gonna play. But what's happened to Barkley, Hurts isn't the same. Yeah, there's questions on offense, but the offense can improve. Let's have a quick look at the NFC North just slightly, obviously, because Lions are in there. Obviously, Lions lost that game. They dropped to third in their division, behind probably one of the surprise packages of the season, which is the Chicago Bears, who are currently top at sort of 7-3. But if we just focus, I mean, yeah, Bears had another great victory for them over the weekend. I think they beat the Vikings, didn't they? But what do you make this Lions outfit? Because they're 6-4. They're in a strong NFC North. When I say strong, because 3 teams have got winning records. But this was a team who nearly went all the way last season, who wowed a lot of fans last season. They're just not the same team this year, are they?
Well, I guess the reason why they're not is the team that's currently sitting atop that division right now, Ben Johnson, who was part of the Lions last season. And I guess it kind of goes to show, right, that because it's largely the same, players that were there last season. And, aggression, and character and all of those good stuff that everybody likes to talk about can only go so far in an NFL that is very competitive, that players are mostly at par with each other. You have a few players who stand out in their positions that are just above the rest, but more often than not, most players, they are professional players, right? And so the level between the teams and not that, in most teams the drop off is not that much, right? So you look at this Lions team and you look at the players that they've got. You look at Jonathan Taylor, you look at Amon Senra, you look at Aiden Hutchinson, in the defense. These are very, very good players, but sometimes you need the right cook to just kind of stir things in. And I think, losing Ben Johnson and also Aaron Glenn, I think has had the impact that we thought they were going to have, right? Because we thought, what's going to happen to them when they lose those 2 coordinators, and how would they progress? And I think, in the start of the season, we're kind of saying, we don't really know about this Lions, and we're kind of saying, oh, maybe Green Bay or something, might be the person that takes that division. But I think what the Bears is showing is that when you have good coaching, because I don't think that the Bears have got exceptional players, I think this is more down to coaching than anything else. And Ben Johnson is just showing, why he was so coveted, in the offseason as a head coach, and why everybody wanted him, to come and be their head coach, because he took that franchise and took a quarterback in Caleb Williams that was looking very indifferent and, was so close to being called a bust, literally. And now he's playing decent football. I'll probably say he's playing as well as Bryce Young, in terms of, number 1 picks, where, you're kind of thinking, okay, we don't know whether they're progressing or they're regressing. He's kind of playing, functional. I don't think they're asking him to do too many things, just keeping it steady, managing the game, don't give the ball away, make the throws that you're supposed to throw. So I think the Bears are full value for where they are. I don't know if everyone trusts them, and it goes back to what you're saying, right? Do you trust the quarterback? If you look at the quarterbacks that are, looking like they're going to be in the playoffs, right? You look at the Rams, you look at Brock Purdy, right? Potentially, he's back now, and you probably say you trust Brock Purdy, a lot more than, you can trust what's going on with the Bears, with Caleb Williams and all of that. You trust Jalen Hurts because he's been there, done that. So yeah, you kind of think they might get into the playoffs, but it might be one and done, depending on who they meet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still all to play for, obviously, in the NFC North, because I said you've got 3 teams on winning records. So the Bears could find themselves winning division, they could find themselves in a wild card, or they could find themselves completely out of it, because you would be a fool to write off the Packers, Lions, or the Vikings are still only 3 games behind, right? You know, so not that I think the Vikings are going to make the playoffs, but technically they still could, just given how tight that division is. But yeah, it's good to see Caleb Williams, perform well this season. It goes to show that sometimes rookies, no matter if they're the first pick or the 100th pick, sometimes they need time, right? Mm. Sometimes they need time to get to a new system, and sometimes it is about the right system, the right coach, and the right environment that allows quarterbacks to flourish. Look at Sam Darnold, look at Baker Mayfield. You know, sometimes this takes time. Sometimes players never find that right system. Look at Justin Fields, right? And yeah, I'm sure we'll talk about that. Not today, maybe we'll talk about another time, because obviously Justin Fields found himself benched again this week. But yeah, I think it's really shaping up to be an interesting season in the NFC North. If we just quickly touch on the NFC South with a lens actually of transitioning over to the AFC, Panthers again, another surprise package of the season. They got another win, a very close win against the rivals Falcons. But top of the division still is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but there's only one game in it. Now the Buccaneers, you can see the smooth transition now to move over to the AFC. The Buccaneers fell short against the AFC's Buffalo Bills. Now, Buffalo Bills must be an absolutely infuriating team for their fans, because in 1 week they go and beat the Chiefs. They then somehow lose to the Dolphins, and then they go and beat the Buccaneers. So it's like, play well against the good teams, lose against a team on their knees. But this was a good win for them. This was a much needed win after the Dolphins' defeat against a good side. How did you rate this one again? So it was a 44-32 win, so lots of points. Allen looked to be back in form, but how did you rate this game?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, this game was in danger at some point, right?
It was crazy. It was a crazy game.
Because at some point I was thinking, this might not be going, because the Falcons were, humming a little bit, and they were ahead in that, game for a large stretch, of the game. And then the Panthers just kicked into gear. I mean, fair play to the Panthers, right? Fair play to them. Fair play to, what they're doing, sticking with the process, progressing the quarterback, and just, continue his development. I mean, do I think they were a threat to anybody? I don't know.
They were a threat to the Cowboys. They were a threat to the Cowboys and the Dolphins. They beat us this season.
They did. And I don't know. But Bryce Young did this last year. Remember, he went through this, purple patch, as we say in football, where he's just like winning games he's not supposed to win, and you just don't know what to make of it. And I feel like this is a little bit like last season. But fair play to them, right? Doing what they're doing. I mean, the Bucs. If we touch on the Bucs right now, I don't know if they're trending down. They've got lots of injuries, right? And Baker Mayfield is not having all the weapons that he typically has. No Mike Evans, to be there to do that. So everything is on a Booker, almost as it is, to make the big plays, to like get them out of holes and things like that. So yeah, I think they need their injured players to come back, and to come back quickly, so that Baker Mayfield can cook, as it were. But I look at the Bucs and I'm thinking, yeah, if they don't get it together, they could get into that slide, right? This is the worst time, of the season to be having your inconsistent form, right? You kind of need to be going into this next stretch, being in momentum to carry you to the playoffs. Because remember what happened to the Eagles, that season where, they won the 10 games and then they dropped off, at the worst possible time, and you just can't stop that slide. It's just like you're slipping down the slope, and you just can't stop it. But the Bills, honestly, you've got to say, I don't know what to make about the Bills. They're a bit Jekyll and Hyde for me, right? I know they came back from their bye and they've been quietly winning. And of course, they beat the Chiefs. So obviously that was headline. But this game started with Josh Allen throwing 2 picks. Mm-hmm. It started with him throwing 2 picks. And I'm thinking to myself, what is going on here? And then it's like, hold on, I'm Josh Allen. You got to respect me. I'm not done yet, you know. And every time the Bucks were like, wait, hold on, can't bully us. Josh Allen's like, calm down. I'm the MVP, of last season. This is how we roll. Okay, let me show you. Running touchdown, boom. The Bucks are like, no, not that fast. We're gonna do our thing here. And Baker Mayfield's like, well, you know what? I could be the MVP. There you go, touchdown. And then Josh Allen comes by and say, hey, hold on, not so fast. Been here before you, been doing this thing for a long time, and not a touchdown. He had 6 touchdowns, both running and passing touchdown. That's just ridiculous, right? I wish I had him in my fantasy. I would have done very well last weekend. But I think, right now in the AFC, everyone will be looking at the Bills and saying, of all the quarterbacks there, who do I trust?
Yeah.
And people will be like, I think you want to trust Josh Allen. And if they keep on, doing what they're doing right now, they're the team that you're going to have to contend with to get to the Super Bowl.
Absolutely. But they haven't made the Super Bowl yet. That's the thing. They're a team that have always fallen short. But this is an absolute ideal opportune time for them to make the playoffs make the Super Bowl, because the team who always does make the Super Bowl in AFC is having a bit of a mare. And let's a bit of a mare, yeah. Let's touch on that, because again, Kansas City Chiefs. We talked about this again. This was a massive game for them. They traveled to Denver to take on the Denver Broncos, who have been on fantastic form, right? Absolutely fantastic form. But this is the Kansas City Chiefs. This is Patrick Mahomes. And despite Denver doing so well that they have done in recent weeks, there's still that kind of nagging doubt that are they really as good as their actual form suggests? We've had the same discussion when it's come to the Colts. Are they actually as good as their form suggests? So certain people who present or co-host this channel picked the Chiefs to win this game. It's because of that, right? It's because it's the Kansas City, and you never bet against the Chiefs. However, they slipped to a 22-19 defeat. Denver's form rolls on. They are most likely, it's still not obviously out of the question, but Denver, like 90% probability, are going to win that division. That means that the Chiefs are going to not win their division for the first time in 10 years. And they'll if they have to if they're going to make the playoffs, which they still might not do, they're going to have to go for the wild card, which is going to be the first time in Patrick Mahomes' career. So, I mean, this was 2 really interesting ways of looking at it. Is it the Chiefs being bad, or is it Denver being that good and everyone's sleeping on them?
The Denver Broncos are a bit like the Eagles in the AFC, right? Unspectacular in terms of how they play, but just finding ways to win. I mean, this game, it wasn't like Bo Nix was throwing touchdowns all over the place. I think he had no touchdown, but more
0. Because he wasn't throwing touchdowns all over the place. He didn't throw any touchdowns.
Yeah, but more importantly, he didn't have any interceptions. And Mahomes had an interception, even though he threw a touchdown. So again, these are the margins, right? Because that game was nick and tuck. You know that the Denver Broncos have a good defense. We've seen it throughout the season, right? Their defense is no joke. So if you want to win against the Broncos, you're going to have to play mistake-free football. And, this game, was still in the balance, right? At one point it was tied, 19-19, Chiefs had 19, Broncos had 19. And you're kind of thinking, Chiefs getting the ball, right? And you're thinking Mahomes has got the ball, right? With about 1, or something like that, a few minutes left in that quarter, you expect that Mahomes goes and does the business, but then they punt, which is kind of like unusual, because usually when you kind of think about the dying moments of a game, you always trend to, okay, I trust Mahomes to pull it out. But then they punt the ball, the Broncos go in, hit a field goal, and win the game. I mean, the Chiefs. This is the thing, I was talking earlier on about the stats about the one score game, right? That they were winning last season. This season, I think they've had 6 or 5 one score games and they've lost all of them, right? So it kind of shows in the NFL, like some things like, we talked about this for even the Washington Commanders at the start of the season when I was like, remember they were winning, Hail Mary, winning games, with last ditch fourth quarter comebacks, which is what the Broncos are doing actually right now. They're winning a lot of games, fourth quarter comebacks, right? These are things that don't always tend to carry over like for a long period of time, right? You get into that hot patch and that's just happening. So clearly the Chiefs are in trouble right now. I think people based on their reputation and history are kind of don't want to, count the Chiefs out. But realistically, there's so many games back right now. They have to not only win their games, but they now have to depend on other people to win games in certain games, for them to actually make it into the playoffs. And their next couple of games is not going to be any easier. They're playing the Colts, as well. And they play the Dallas Cowboys. And now playing the Dallas Cowboys, I'm even thinking to myself, maybe that's even a bit positive, right? Looking at these Chiefs, I'm thinking maybe the Cowboys might even win that game because, I would counter that as a loss, right? You're playing the Chiefs, you're playing Mahomes, that's a loss. But not this Chiefs, right? So yeah, I mean, it's clearly we're going to see new players in the AFC, going into the playoffs and perhaps into the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think you're right. I can't. I still think the Chiefs will somehow make it to the playoffs because it's one of these things. You look at it. I mean, they're 5-5 at the moment. You look at you look at who are the other wild cards. So you've got the Bills are the 5th seed at the moment because it'll be between both the Bills and the Patriots in the in the AFC. They're both going to get into the playoffs. I think that's a given. But in 6th seed, you've got the Chargers, divisional rivals. They're 2 games ahead, and the 7th seed are the Jaguars, who are 6-4. And if you want a team who personifies inconsistency, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars at the moment, who are 6-4. Absolutely smashed the Chargers at the weekend. We don't know what happened there to the Chargers, but it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if the Chiefs can go on and could nick that 6th or 7th place in the wild card. What they have to do is improve their away record. They're 4-1 at home, but then 1-4 away. Right?
Yeah, but
that's not covers.
But if you look at what the Jacksonville Jaguars have to deal with, their next couple of games are winnable, right? They play the Arizona Cardinals. That's a win.
Mm-hmm.
They play the Tennessee Titans. That's a win.
It should be, yeah.
They play the New York Jets. That's a win.
Well, that'll be why looking at this playoff odds chart, the Jaguars, they've got a 62% probability of making the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. They have a gentle run of fixtures.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. That's the big word you've got to use in Jacksonville. So look, we wanted to try and keep this recording to the half an hour, and we've just crept over. So I'm going to ask you very simple. I'm going to ask you very simply now a simple question, based on where we are in the playoff race, and we're going to keep coming back to the playoffs every week now, right? Can you pick? If we're looking now, 18th of November, name your Super Bowl. Name your Super Bowl teams.
I've got to go with the Bills. I've got to go with the Bills from the AFC. And
you can't say Cowboys.
Eagles. Oh, sickening. Need to go wash my mouth with soap. Look, it looks like it's going to be the Bills Eagles in that Super Bowl. I mean, you're looking at two teams that you can trust. Eagles being the fact that been there, done that. This is going to be their third Super Bowl in 4 years. And then you got to go with Bills because you trust the quarterback. Out of all the other quarterbacks that are trying to get in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I'm calling it right now, I think that's it.
Well, I'm agreeing with you on the Bills, but I'm going to disagree with you on the NFC because I just want to make you happy, Eddie. I'm going to go for the Rams. I think the Bills and the Rams are the two teams that I'm looking at the moment. I've been impressed with the Rams. I've been less impressed with the Bills because the way I see it, if anybody can if anyone can lose to the Miami Dolphins, you don't deserve to get to the playoffs, let alone the Super Bowl. But I just think this has to be the Bills' time, right? You've got the Chiefs in disarray. The Ravens are slowly. Well, I say slowly. They've won 4 on the bounce now. They're 5-5, and it wouldn't surprise me if they, take the AFC North and jump into the playoffs. But this should be the Bills' time to do it, right? So I'd put my faith in Alan to get that done. But let's end that there. I think what we'll do is if we get time later in the week, Eddie, let's catch up again and go through some of the other stories from the weekend when we do our predictions, because there's lots of other stuff to talk about and we've had to try and skip over this weekend. But another fantastic weekend. Love breaking down here as per normal. But Eddie, for today, take us home.
Yeah, what a glorious day. Vegas is one of those places that I've been to, love going there. And certainly for the Cowboys, it was a great place to go there, so much that their wide receivers enjoyed it a little bit too much and forgot that they were playing, a game on Monday night. But, all's forgiven, they all had a marvelous, game. But more importantly, it was week 11 and, all the games were definitely things to talk about. So appreciate all of you guys that have watched this to the end as well. We do want to say thank you to all of you. Hit that like and subscribe button as well. And also join in the conversation in the comments. Let us know what was your biggest takeaway, from week 11. And we'll be back to look at our predictions. And I have a sinking feeling because I kind of know what's going on. I have this sinking feeling that what Matt has been waiting for weeks and weeks has finally happened this week. But you're gonna have to watch that one to see how it breaks down. But until the next one, I'll see you across the gridiron.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the